Don't forget to like this video, drop a comment, and hit the subscribe button so you never miss another story like this one. Now, let's begin. They called him the Snake, and for good reason. Imagine a man so feared, so clever, that even from a prison cell he could decide who lived, who died, and who ran the streets of New York. Carmine Persico wasn't just another mobster, he was a boss who refused to be silenced. Even as a young boy in Brooklyn, people noticed something different about him. While other kids were just trying to get by, Carmine studied the men in sharp suits, the ones who gave orders without raising their voices. He wanted that power, and he knew he'd take it. The streets became his classroom. In gang fights, he didn't hesitate. They said once Carmine made his move, there was no escape, quick, ruthless, precise, like a snake striking. That reputation spread faster than anyone expected. Soon, whispers of the snake reached the ears of men much higher in the Mafia world. And while many thought his age would hold him back, Carmine proved them wrong again and again. He wasn't just surviving in the shadows, he was rising, and the city was beginning to feel his bite. But this was only the beginning. He started small, running with a Brooklyn crew that collected debts and settled scores, but Carmine never blended in with the rest. Where others rushed in with fists, he calculated. He could read a room, sense weakness, and strike at the perfect moment. That calm edge made older men notice him. They said he didn't just fight, he controlled the fight. And in the world he was stepping into, control meant everything. One night, when a clash with a rival gang broke out, most kids froze, but Carmine didn't hesitate. He lunged forward with the kind of cold determination that silenced everyone watching. By the time it ended, no one doubted his toughness. Word of his fearlessness spread fast, climbing its way up to the Colombo family. They began to hear stories of a kid called the Snake, a name that carried both fear and respect. For Carmine, this was the break he wanted. He was no longer just a street kid, he was becoming a man the mob would lean on. But with every step deeper into that world, the stakes grew higher, and soon Carmine would find himself making choices that bound him to the Mafia for life. By his early 20s, Carmine was already moving up faster than anyone expected. The Colombo family saw in him something rare, a man young enough to take risks, but sharp enough to know when to wait. He wasn't satisfied with being just another soldier. Every job he touched, he turned into an opportunity to prove he was more than muscle. He thought like a strategist, and the bosses respected that. His real test came when a rival crew started cutting into Colombo territory. Older men hesitated, worried about drawing heat from the cops, but Carmine stepped in with a plan. He organized the strike with precision, quick, quiet, and brutal enough to leave no doubt about who owned the streets. The job was carried out so cleanly that even men twice his age had to admit they were looking at a future boss. After that, no one saw him as just a young recruit. He was the Snake, the man who could settle scores and make money flow, all without losing his cool. Each move pushed him higher, but every rise in power meant new enemies waiting in the dark, watching for a chance to take him down. With power came danger, and Carmine knew it. The more respect he earned, the more eyes turned against him. Some were rivals from other families, but some were jealous men from within his own. In the Mafia, ambition was as deadly as a bullet. Yet Carmine had a way of surviving storms. He made allies carefully, built debts that others owed him, and never let anyone read his next move. Even when older bosses dismissed him as too young, he outsmarted them, leaving no doubt that he belonged at the top. But no matter how clever he was, the law kept closing in. Arrests, trials, endless investigations, each one was supposed to end his rise. Instead, Carmine treated prison like just another battlefield. When most men lost their influence behind bars, Carmine's name only grew. He sent orders through visitors, through lawyers, even through coded notes so simple they slipped past the guards. From his cell, he showed he could still control the game. Every time the authorities thought they had finally trapped him, Carmine slipped away, reminding everyone why they called him the Snake. And this was only the beginning of his battle with the system. Of his strength. From the moment he walked through those gates, he carried himself like a man who was still in charge. Other inmates watched how guards treated him differently, how messages seemed to reach him from the outside. It was as if the bars were invisible. His authority came not from shouting or threats but from the quiet certainty that he was still the boss. His loyal soldiers on the outside made sure of it. Money still moved, debts were still collected, and rivals were reminded that Carmine's word carried weight even from a cell. Through coded letters, trusted lieutenants, and whispered orders, he kept the Colombo family running as if nothing had changed. The FBI couldn't believe it. To them, prison was supposed to cut a man off. But Carmine showed the world that walls couldn't contain power built on loyalty and fear. For him, the cell was just another office, and he ran his empire with the same precision as before. If anything, the legend of Carmine Persico only grew stronger, because who else could control the streets from behind iron bars? The longer Carmine stayed inside, the more dangerous he became. While others counted days, he studied the system. He learned which guards could be bought, which rules could be bent, and how to make prison work in his favor. Some officers feared him, others quietly took his money, but all of them understood one thing: Carmine Persico was not an ordinary inmate. His influence slipped through every crack, and soon it was clear that his reach outside the walls had not weakened at all. Meanwhile, the Colombo family was tearing itself apart in bloody wars for control. Bullets sprayed across New York streets, men fell in ambushes, and the family's future seemed uncertain. But even in the chaos, Carmine's word decided who rose and who fell. Soldiers followed his orders as if he were still standing beside them. Rivals tried to outmaneuver him, thinking prison would finally silence the snake, but every time they moved, Carmine struck back without leaving his cell. The FBI tried everything: transfers, wiretaps, even watching his lawyers, but nothing worked. Somehow, his orders always found their way out. To his enemies, it was terrifying. To his men, it was proof that Carmine Persico could never truly be caged. The street wars only deepened Carmine's legend. The Colombo family split into factions, brothers turning their guns on each other, yet through it all, his name carried the final weight. Some believed he fueled the bloodshed to remind everyone that even locked away, he was still the one in charge. Others thought he was simply protecting what was his. Either way, the result was the same: men feared disobeying him more than they feared bullets. Carmine trusted almost no one. He had seen betrayal too many times, and he knew jealousy could be more dangerous than a rival's gun. Even his closest allies understood that his loyalty came with sharp edges: one wrong move and you were out, permanently. That constant suspicion kept him alive, and it kept others cautious. To many on the streets, it seemed almost supernatural, a ghostly hand guiding the family's every step. The violence destroyed families and drew endless heat from law enforcement, but Carmine remained steady. He didn't need to show his face. His power came from fear, respect, and the myth that grew larger with each passing year. And the scariest part? Nobody could ever tell what he might do next. Law enforcement thought they could crush him with time. They stacked charges, handed him sentences meant to last a lifetime, and celebrated each conviction as if it were the final blow. But every time they tried to bury him, Carmine seemed to rise stronger. To the outside world, he became the man who mocked the system, the godfather who turned a prison cell into a throne. Reporters wrote about him, politicians pointed to him, and the FBI grew obsessed with proving he wasn't untouchable. Yet what really kept him in power wasn't just fear, it was loyalty. Carmine had built a circle of lieutenants who would never dare cross him. They understood that their own survival was tied to his approval, and they carried out his orders with precision. Construction deals, union rackets, loan sharking, all of it continued as if he were walking free. And the harder the authorities pressed, the more mythical he became. To the government, he was a problem that refused to go away. To the underworld, he was living proof that true power didn't need freedom. Carmine Persico had become something bigger than a man. He was a symbol, a shadow that no prison could erase. Time eventually caught up with Carmine, but not in the way his enemies hoped. His health began to fail, yet his name still carried the same weight it always had. Younger mobsters tried to rise, eager to carve their own place, but they still looked to his cell for approval. Even in weakness, Carmine's shadow stretched long over the Colombo family. He had outlasted rivals, wars, and endless investigations. That survival alone turned him into something more than a boss. He became a legend. Inside prison, his presence never softened. Guards said he carried himself like a man who owned the place, not one trapped by it. Other inmates gave him space, some out of respect, others out of fear. Decades had passed, yet his will remained unbroken. For many, that was the clearest sign of his strength. Where most men faded after years behind bars, Carmine had turned prison into his empire. His life was no longer about freedom, but about influence, and that influence never dimmed. To the mob world, Carmine Persico proved a chilling truth: power could survive walls, chains, even time itself. And that truth made his legend impossible to ignore. When the end finally came in 2019, Carmine Persico had spent more than half his life behind bars. He died at 85, still known as the boss of the Colombo family. News of his passing spread quickly, stirring mixed emotions. For law enforcement, it felt like the closing of a chapter they had fought for decades to end. For his enemies, it was a quiet relief, as though a shadow had finally lifted. But for his followers, it marked the loss of a man who had defied every rule, a man who proved that bars could never silence true authority. His story left behind more than blood and crime. It left a lesson about fear, respect, and the strange kind of power that can last even without freedom. Carmine the Snake Persico showed the world that a man could control an empire from a prison cell, turning weakness into strength and punishment into legend. His name still echoes in Mafia history, a reminder of how far determination can reach. Don't forget to like this video, leave a comment with your thoughts, and subscribe for more stories like this one. The tale of Carmine Persico may be over, but his legend will never fade.